sat there at the dinner table staring at my plate, not really seeing the food. The house was so quiet, too quiet. Lisa had cooked a roast, her go-to meal when she didn't want to make too much effort. She moved around the kitchen cleaning up, but I noticed she didn't look at me, didn't ask about my day. Her phone was within arm's reach, like it always was lately, and every now and then she'd glance at it. There was something different about her. I'd felt it for months. Ever since the kids left for college, something had shifted. At first, I thought it was just us adjusting to the empty nest. We had been together for over 2 decades, and I figured it was normal for things to change. I told myself we just needed time to get used to it. But this was different. It was the way she'd become attached to her phone, the way she spent hours at the gym, and how she was always texting someone. I wasn't blind. I could feel the distance between us growing, but I pushed it aside. I didn't want to believe something was wrong. Maybe we should get away, I suggested, keeping my voice casual. A weekend trip somewhere, just the two of us. It's been a while. Lisa didn't even turn to look at me. She kept scrubbing a plate, her back to me. I don't know, she muttered, her tone flat. I've got a lot going on right now. I need some space. That response hit me harder than I expected. Space? From what? From me? I thought about pressing her, asking her what was really going on, but something in her voice warned me to back off. So I did. I let it slide, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. Space. We'd been together for 23 years, and suddenly she needed space? It didn't make sense. The next week, I started noticing the little things. She spent even more time on the phone. I walked into the room one evening, and she cut the call short the second she saw me. I didn't say anything, but I caught the way she smiled nervously, brushing it off like it was nothing. But I saw through that. The smile didn't reach her eyes. It was like she was hiding something. That night, she stayed up late texting, her phone always angled away from me, like she didn't want me to see the screen. The next day, she was off to the gym again. Hours later, she still wasn't home. I sent her a text, nothing. An hour later, I called straight to voicemail. By the time she finally got back, it was well into the evening. She gave me some excuse about running errands after her workout. Again, I didn't press. I wanted to believe her. But the excuses were piling up, and I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut anymore. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the dark living room, staring at her phone on the coffee table. It buzzed with a notification, lighting up the room for a second. I didn't touch it. Not yet. But I had to know. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't going to sit around pretending everything was okay. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I picked up her phone and scrolled through her call logs. There it was, an unknown number, one I didn't recognize, and she had been calling it a lot. At least once a day for the last couple of weeks. My stomach twisted. I wanted to believe it was nothing, just some work thing or a friend I didn't know. But deep down, I knew better. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I started paying more attention, piecing together the inconsistencies. She was distracted all the time, barely acknowledging me or asking about my day. It was like she wasn't really here anymore, her body present, but her mind was somewhere else, with someone else. A few days later, I was about to ask her directly to put everything out on the table when my phone buzzed. It was a message from our mutual friend, Jenna. I opened it without thinking. Ben, I thought you should know. I've seen Lisa with a guy from her gym. She's been meeting him for months. My heart stopped. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Months? This wasn't just some fling. This was something real. I stared at the message, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it. I knew things were off between us, but to hear it confirmed like that, it hit me harder than I expected. I didn't need to hear anymore. Jenna had no reason to lie, no reason to make something like this up. I knew it was true. And suddenly, everything made sense. The time she spent away from home, the gym, the phone calls, the way she'd become distant, detached. I put my phone down and sat there numb. Lisa had been seeing someone behind my back for months, and I'd been too blind, too trusting, to see it. I thought we were just going through a rough patch, that it was something we could fix, but there was nothing to fix. She had already moved on, long before I even realized what was happening. I thought about confronting her right then and there, but I stopped myself. I needed a plan. I wasn't going to let her know how much this hurt, how much it was tearing me apart. No, I was going to play it smart. She wouldn't see it coming. So I waited. I watched. Every time she went out, I noted how long she was gone. Every time her phone buzzed, I took a mental note. The more I observed, the more obvious it became. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She thought I was oblivious, too wrapped up in my own world to notice what was happening right under my nose. But I wasn't oblivious. I knew. And I was going to make sure she paid for this. Every evening, I sat there, pretending everything was normal, acting like I didn't see the cracks in our life. But inside, I was calculating, planning my next move. Lisa had no idea what was coming. She thought she could just sneak around, have her little fling, and everything would be fine. She thought I'd never find out. She was wrong. After that message from Jenna, things started falling into place, and the doubt I had turned into certainty. Lisa had been seeing someone else for months right under my nose, and I had let it happen. The betrayal burned deep, but I wasn't going to let it break me. If anything, it sharpened my focus. I needed to know more. I needed proof, undeniable evidence that would not only expose her, but give me leverage when I needed it most. I decided to follow her. The next day, Lisa had her usual gym session scheduled. It was routine by now. She'd leave the house in the morning, telling me she'd hit the gym for a couple of hours, maybe run a few errands afterward. I let her go without saying a word, just a casual nod as she walked out the door. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my keys, slipped out the back door, and followed at a distance, making sure I wasn't too obvious. I trailed her car, keeping enough space between us that she wouldn't notice. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her pull into the gym parking lot, just like she said. For a moment, I almost second-guessed myself. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe she really was just at the gym. But I waited, sitting in my car across the street, keeping an eye on the entrance. 45 minutes passed, then an hour. Lisa didn't come out. I started to wonder if she had found some other way to sneak out of the gym without me noticing. But then, just when I was about to lose my patience, I saw her. She walked out with a guy younger than her by at least 10 years, tall, muscular, the kind of guy who probably lived at the gym. They were laughing, talking casually like they hadn't a care in the world. She didn't even try to hide it. He held the door open for her and they walked off together side by side. My gut twisted. I stayed in my car, keeping my distance, but my anger surged. How could she do this? How long had it been going on? I watched as they got into his car and drove off together, leaving me sitting there, my mind racing. I followed them again, careful not to get too close. They drove out of town, heading to some place I wasn't familiar with. When they finally stopped, it was at a small cafe, tucked away from the main road. I watched them through the window as they sat down, chatting, laughing, completely at ease with each other. I didn't need to see any more. I knew enough now to confirm what I'd been suspecting all along. This wasn't some passing fling. She was invested in this, but seeing it with my own eyes didn't break me. It fueled me. If she thought she could play me for a fool, she was dead wrong. That night, I didn't say anything to Lisa when she came home. I didn't need to. I already knew what I had to do, and I wasn't about to show my hand too early. She acted normal, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just spent hours with another man while I sat at home, pretending everything was fine. I played along, kept it cool. I needed to stay calm, patient. Over the next few days, I started digging deeper. I knew I couldn't just confront her with what I'd seen. I needed proof, something undeniable. The phone logs were one thing, but I wanted more. I knew Lisa kept everything organized, emails, messages. She was meticulous. So I waited until she was out of the house again, probably off to see him. That's when I made my move. I sat down at her computer, logged in, and started going through her emails. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There they were, messages between her and her lover, detailing everything. They talked about their meetups, their time together, things they'd done that made me want to throw up. It was all there, written out in plain sight. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. One message caught my eye. It was from months ago, long before I started noticing the distance between us. In the email, Lisa told him she was thinking of ending things, that it was getting too risky. She talked about how guilty she felt, how she still loved me, how she didn't want to lose her family. But it was obvious from the more recent messages that nothing had changed. They were still meeting, still carrying on, like they hadn't a care in the world. That old email, the one where she mentioned ending things, was a lie. She had never meant it. For a moment I hesitated. Maybe she had tried to end it. Maybe she did feel guilty. But then I remembered seeing them together, laughing like nothing mattered, and all that hesitation disappeared. The betrayal was real, and it was ongoing. There was no coming back from this. I saved every message, every email, making sure I had a copy of everything. This was my leverage, my insurance. When the time came, I would use it. That night, I couldn't hold back anymore. After dinner, I sat Lisa down at the kitchen table. I had all the evidence in front of me, printed out, ready to show her. She looked at me, confused, probably wondering what was going on. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone casual, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I laid the papers in front of her. "This," I said, "is everything you have been hiding from me." Her face went pale as she glanced at the emails, the phone logs, the evidence of her affair. She didn't try to deny it. There was no point. She knew she was caught. I can explain," she stammered, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't insult me by trying to explain. I know everything. I've seen everything." She sat there silent, her eyes dropping to the table, unable to meet my gaze. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost. But then the anger surged again, and I pushed the sympathy aside. "I trusted you," I said, my voice cold. "For months, I've been trying to figure out what was going on. And all this time, you've been sneaking around behind my back with him." She didn't say anything. There was nothing she could say that would make any of this better. I wasn't here for an explanation. I wasn't here for her apologies. I wanted to see the look on her face to make her realize how badly she'd screwed up. "I want a divorce," I said finally, my voice hard and decisive. "I'm done." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide in shock. "Ben, wait, we can talk about this." "No," I interrupted. "We're not talking about anything. I've made up my mind. You wanted excitement? You wanted to run off with some younger guy? Fine. But you're not going to take everything we've built together and walk away like it's nothing." Her lips trembled as she started to say something, but I didn't let her. I stood up, grabbed the papers, and walked away, leaving her sitting there, stunned and speechless. As I walked out of the room, I could feel the weight of everything lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but I had taken the first step. The hardest part was done. She knew I wasn't going to let her get away with it, and now it was time to put the rest of my plan into motion. The next day, I started moving assets, quietly shifting money out of our joint accounts and into ones she couldn't touch. I met with my lawyer, making sure everything was in place to protect what was mine. Lisa had no idea what was coming. She thought she could still fix things, that she could somehow win me back. But I wasn't interested in fixing anything. I was focused on making sure she didn't get a penny more than she deserved. Then, in the middle of everything, I found something unexpected, an old message from Lisa to her lover. She'd tried to end it once. She'd talked about the guilt, how she didn't want to lose me. For a brief moment, doubt flickered again. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe she did feel something for me after all. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it didn't matter. She hadn't ended it. She'd carried on, pretending nothing was wrong, all while I sat at home like an idiot, oblivious to the truth. I pushed the doubt aside. No, I wasn't being too harsh. Lisa had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. I could feel the pieces of my plan coming together. It was time to take the next step. I filed the divorce papers, made sure everything was in order, and prepared for the fallout. Lisa was about to lose everything, and she didn't even see it coming. The night I served her the papers, she looked at me like she didn't believe it, like she still thought she could talk her way out of this. Ben, please, we can work through this. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, her voice trembling. I stared at her, unmoved. It's too late, Lisa. You destroyed us. She didn't say anything after that, just sat there, holding the papers in her hands, her eyes wide with fear. She knew it was over. As I walked out of the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had taken control of the situation, and I wasn't going to let her win. The storm was coming, and Lisa had no idea just how much she was about to lose. The morning after I served her the divorce papers, I didn't waste any time. I was done playing the waiting game, and there was no room for hesitation now. The first thing I did was contact our financial advisor and lawyer. I wanted to make sure everything was in motion, that Lisa wouldn't get a single penny more than what she deserved, if anything. I wasn't just trying to cut her off, I was making sure she'd feel the consequences of her choices. Every decision she'd made behind my back was about to come back and bite her. Hard. As I sat in the lawyer's office, reviewing the documents, I felt a strange sense of detachment. This was business now. I had stopped thinking about the emotional weight of the betrayal. I wasn't angry, not anymore. Anger had given way to something colder, something more focused. Lisa had made her bed, and now she was going to lie in it. She wanted excitement, right? She was about to get it, but not in the way she'd imagined. Once the paperwork was finalized, I moved fast. I transferred every joint asset we had into accounts under my name. The house, mine, the savings, all moved. Retirement accounts, cashed out where possible and funneled into secure spots Lisa wouldn't be able to touch. By the time she realized what was happening, it would be too late. I wasn't going to give her a chance to fight me on this. After the meeting, I headed out for a drink. It wasn't celebration exactly. It was more of a quiet acknowledgement that I was taking control again, reclaiming the pieces of my life that Lisa had tried to steal from me. I sat at the bar, nursing a whiskey when I heard someone call my name. Ben? I looked up and saw Tim, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. We drifted apart, as people do, but we'd been close once. He looked the same as I remembered, gruff, but with a kind face that hid behind his beard. Tim, I said, nodding as he pulled up a seat next to me. Long time. He ordered a beer and we fell into easy conversation. It turned out Tim had been through a rough patch himself. He'd gone through a divorce a couple of years ago, messy as hell from what he told me. His ex-wife had tried to take everything from him, but he fought her every step of the way. As he talked, I felt a sense of camaraderie. Tim had been through the same hell I was going through now, and he'd come out the other side. I don't know what happened with you, man, he said, taking a swig of his beer, but I can see it in your face. You got that same look I had when everything went to shit. I stared into my glass, nodding. Yay, Lisa. 23 years of marriage, and she decides she's bored, wants to shack up with some gym rat. Tim shook his head, letting out a low whistle. That's brutal. You're going through the divorce now? Just started, I replied. Filed the papers yesterday. She doesn't even know what's coming yet. Tim leaned back, eyeing me. Good. Don't give her an inch, man. She'll take everything if you let her. But if you stay one step ahead, she won't have a chance. Trust me, I've been there. It's war, and you've got to be ready to fight dirty. His words stuck with me. I wasn't looking for advice, but hearing Tim talk about his own experience gave me a new sense of resolve. He was right. This wasn't just about protecting what was mine anymore. It was about making sure Lisa paid for every betrayal, every lie, every moment she'd made me feel like I wasn't enough. We talked for a while longer, and by the time I left the bar, I felt more prepared than ever. Tim had given me a push in the right direction, and I knew exactly what I needed to do next. Lisa wasn't going to see any mercy from me. She was about to learn just how ruthless I could be. A few days later, Lisa tried to talk to me. I had expected it, of course. She was desperate now, realizing that her little fling had fallen apart. Her younger lover had dumped her, moved on to someone else, and she was left with nothing but the wreckage of our marriage. The man she had thrown everything away for had left her in the dust, and now she wanted to come crawling back. Ben, she said, catching me in the kitchen after I came home from work. Her voice was soft, her eyes red like she'd been crying. Can we talk? I didn't stop what I was doing. I opened the fridge, pulled out a beer, and cracked it open. About what? I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. I know I hurt you, but we've been together for so long. We can fix this, right? Please, Ben, I don't want to lose you. I stared at her, taking a long sip of my beer before responding. You don't want to lose me? Lisa, you lost me the second you decided some other guy was worth more than our marriage. There's no fixing this. She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. But it's over, Ben. I ended it. I swear. We can start over. We can... I cut her off, my voice cold and flat. It's too late, Lisa. You don't get to decide when this is over. I do. And trust me, it's done. Her face crumpled, and she let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity. This wasn't my problem anymore. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. You've already signed the papers, I said, stepping around her. Now you can deal with the fallout. She didn't try to follow me. She didn't say anything else. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her there, crying into her hands. It should have felt satisfying, seeing her broken like that. But it didn't. There was no pleasure in it, no sense of victory. Just an emptiness where I thought I'd feel something. In the days that followed, things moved quickly. The divorce process was in full swing, and I made sure everything was locked down. Lisa fought me on a few points, but her attempts were weak, desperate. She had no real leverage, not after what she'd done. I took the house, the savings, everything. And I didn't feel an ounce of guilt about it. Lisa was left scrambling, trying to figure out how she could salvage anything from the wreckage. But by the time she realized how much she'd lost, it was already too late. I'd made sure of that. I moved forward, cutting ties with her in every way that mattered. I didn't care where she went or what she did next. I was done. The only thing I had left to do was rebuild my life piece by piece, and that meant leaving Lisa and her mess behind. It wasn't long after that when I ran into Tim again. We met for a drink, catching up on how things had played out. He nodded as I told him about the divorce, about how Lisa had tried to worm her way back in and failed. You did the right thing, Tim said, clinking his glass against mine. You didn't let her win. Now you can move on. I took a sip of my drink, letting the alcohol burn in my throat. Yeah, moving on. That's the plan. And it was. I'd won. I'd taken control of my life again. Cut Lisa out like a cancer that had been eating away at me for years. But as I sat there talking with Tim, I realized that winning didn't feel as good as I thought it would. There was no celebration, no real sense of triumph. It was just over. The divorce was finalized soon after, and with that final signature, Lisa was out of my life for good. She tried to contact me a few times after that, but I ignored her. There was nothing left to say. We were done. I sold the house, moved into a new place, one that didn't have any memories attached to it. It felt good to start fresh, to have a clean slate. I started dating again, meeting new people, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had control of my life. But even with all that, there were moments when I'd think about Lisa, about everything we'd had, and I'd wonder if I'd made the right choice. Not about the divorce, that had been inevitable, but about how far I'd gone to make sure she felt the consequences. Was it too much? Could I have been more lenient? The doubt didn't last long. I knew that if I hadn't fought for what was mine, Lisa would have taken everything without a second thought. She didn't deserve my pity. She deserved exactly what she got. Still, there were nights when I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. No matter how hard I tried to move forward, the past was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. But I'd made my choice, and I wasn't going to look back. As I closed that chapter of my life for good, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same man I'd been before. Lisa's betrayal had changed me, hardened me in ways I hadn't expected. But I wasn't broken. I was stronger now, more determined than ever to keep control of my life, no matter what came next. I finalized the divorce with a kind of ruthless efficiency. Lisa was blindsided, just as I'd planned. While she floundered, trying to hold on to some semblance of control, I made sure there was nothing left for her to grasp. Our vacation home, sold. Retirement accounts, cashed out. Every asset that could be moved, I moved. I didn't care about the memories attached to anything anymore. Memories meant nothing when the trust they were built on had been shattered. It was time to wipe the slate clean. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, watching as the final paperwork slid across the desk, each page stamped with official signatures. There was a certain satisfaction in it, knowing that all of this was going to hit Lisa like a truck. She was so used to having everything neatly arranged, her life in perfect order. That was about to implode, and she had no idea. By the time she tried to fight back, it would already be too late. When I got home that night, the house was quiet. It was almost eerie. Lisa was still living there for the moment, but she kept to herself, probably figuring out what her next move would be. There was no point in talking to her anymore. I knew she had nothing left to say that I wanted to hear. I spent the next few days making sure everything was locked down, every loophole closed, every financial string tied up. I wasn't going to give her any wiggle room. The lawyer warned me that she might try to delay the proceedings, drag it out, but I wasn't worried. I had anticipated that. Sure enough, just as everything seemed settled, I got a call from my lawyer. "Ben, Lisa's filed a motion," he said, his voice sounding weary. "She's trying to fight for more, claiming you hid assets during the divorce." I could feel the heat rise in my chest, but I tamped it down. "I didn't hide anything," I said, keeping my voice even. "She's grasping at straws." "Probably, but she's playing hardball now, and that could mean delays. Are you prepared for that?" I'd seen this coming. Of course, Lisa was going to try and claw back some control. That was her way of thinking, always trying to manipulate the situation, always trying to keep the upper hand. But I was one step ahead, just like I'd been from the beginning. I wasn't going to let her turn this into a drawn-out fight. "We push forward," I said. "She's not getting another dime." The days following her legal stunt were a mix of tense waiting and quiet preparation. My lawyer assured me that we had all the precautions in place, that Lisa's attempts were weak at best, but that didn't stop her from trying to drag me through the mud. She was desperate, and desperate people are unpredictable. At the same time, I prepared for the final phase of my plan, making sure everyone knew the truth about her affair. I wasn't just going to walk away and let her maintain any shred of dignity in front of our friends and family. She had lied to me, humiliated me, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. There was a dinner party coming up, a gathering of mutual friends, many of whom had no idea what had really gone down. They were still in the dark about Lisa's affair, still believing that our split was just another case of two people drifting apart. I wasn't about to let her control that narrative. In the days leading up to the party, Lisa seemed more frantic than ever. She'd stopped trying to talk to me, but I could see the panic in her eyes, hear it in the way she moved around the house, almost as if she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She knew something was coming, but I don't think she fully grasped just how brutal it was going to be. I played it cool, keeping my distance, not letting on that I was about to detonate her life in front of everyone she cared about. She thought she still had time, thought she could delay the inevitable. She was wrong. On the day of the party, I walked in calm, composed, the storm brewing beneath the surface. Lisa was already there, putting on a brave face, smiling at our friends like nothing was wrong. It made my skin crawl to watch her, pretending like she hadn't betrayed me, pretending like she hadn't been sneaking around behind my back for months. The moment I'd been waiting for arrived when someone asked the dreaded question, "So what really happened between you two?" Everyone turned to me, expecting the usual polite brush-off, the vague explanations about growing apart. But that wasn't what they got. I leaned back in my chair, locking eyes with Lisa. Her face went pale the second she realized what I was about to do. "Why don't you tell them, Lisa?" I said, my voice casual but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell them about your affair with that guy from the gym, the one you threw away 23 years of marriage for." The room went dead silent. All eyes shifted to her. I watched as her face crumbled, the facade she'd been trying so hard to maintain finally shattering. She didn't have the energy to deny it. There was no point. Everyone could see the truth written all over her face. She stammered, tried to piece together some excuse, but it was too late. The damage was done. She was humiliated, exposed for the liar she was. Our friends, the people she'd been trying so hard to impress, looked at her with a mix of shock and disgust. She'd lost everything, and I had made sure of it. That moment should have felt like a victory. I had executed my plan perfectly, dismantled her life the way she had dismantled mine. But as I stood there, watching her fall apart, there was no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, just emptiness. Lisa left the party early, her head down, her voice shaking as she tried to make excuses to the few people who would still listen. But no one cared. She was alone now, just like I had been when I first discovered her betrayal. The tables had turned, but the victory felt hollow. In the days after the party, Lisa tried to salvage whatever was left of her social circle, but the damage had been done. Word spread quickly, and the people who once admired her now saw her for who she really was, a woman who had thrown away everything for a cheap thrill. She had nothing left, no support, no friends. And that was the final piece of my plan falling into place. I thought that once it was all over, I'd feel free, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But instead, I just felt tired. I had won. I had taken everything from her, just like she had taken everything from me. But in the end, there was no sense of joy in it. Only the realization that no matter how much you destroy someone else, it doesn't fix the damage they've done to you. The divorce was finalized soon after. Lisa didn't have the energy to fight anymore. She signed the papers, accepting the reality that she was leaving with nothing. I took the house, the savings, everything we had built over the years, and walked away without looking back. In the end, she was left with her regrets and a reputation in ruins. She had lost everything she thought she wanted, and I had made sure of that. But as I moved on, there was still a part of me that couldn't shake the question. Had it all been worth it? Maybe I'd been too harsh. Maybe there was a different way to handle things. But every time I started to feel that doubt creep in, I remembered what Lisa had done. The lies, the betrayal, the way she had torn our life apart for some fleeting sense of excitement. And in those moments, I knew I had made the right choice. I sold the house soon after, bought a new place on the other side of town, away from the memories, away from the reminders of what had happened. It was a fresh start, and I needed that. I wasn't the same person anymore. Lisa's betrayal had changed me in ways I hadn't expected, but it had also made me stronger, more focused. As for Lisa, I don't know what happened to her. I stopped caring after the divorce was finalized. She was just a chapter in my life, a chapter that had ended the moment I walked out of that lawyer's office for the last time. Whatever she did next was her problem, not mine. I had moved on. I was ready to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and leave the past behind me where it belonged. There was no going back, and I didn't want to. The future was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control again. But even with all that, there were nights when I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever really be able to move past it. The scars were there, deep, and I knew they'd never fully heal. But that was okay. They were part of me now, a reminder of what I'd survived. And in the end, survival was all that mattered. The final confrontation was inevitable. I could feel it building for days, weeks even. Lisa had been trying to salvage whatever was left of her life, but she was crumbling. Our friends weren't returning her calls anymore. The whispers were growing louder, and her carefully constructed image was falling apart. Every time I saw her, she looked smaller, more fragile, as if the weight of everything she'd done was crushing her bit by bit. Then came the gathering. It wasn't just any gatherings. It was one of those social events where everyone in our circle showed up, the kind of thing Lisa used to thrive in. I wasn't sure if she was going to show her face, but she did. She had to know what was coming, but maybe some part of her still thought she could control the narrative. that she could walk in and somehow smooth things over. I arrived late, intentionally. When I walked in, I could feel the tension immediately. What People were talking, laughing, but there was this undercurrent, a quiet murmur that followed Lisa around the room. She was trying to act like nothing was wrong, forcing smiles, making small talk, but the cracks were visible. She looked over at me when I entered, her face pale. I didn't smile back. I wasn't there to make things easy for her. The night dragged on, conversations flowing around me, but I wasn't listening. I was waiting. I could see Lisa glancing over at me every now and then, her eyes filled with a kind of quiet panic, like she knew she was walking on thin ice and I was the one who could send her crashing through. Finally, someone asked the question. It was inevitable. "So Ben, what happened between you two?" I felt everyone's eyes shift to me. The room grew quiet. They were expecting me to brush it off, to give some polite, vague answer about us growing apart. That's what people in these circles did. You didn't air your dirty laundry in public. You kept things civil. You maintained appearances. But I wasn't going to play that game anymore. I leaned back in my chair, taking a sip of my drink before locking eyes with Lisa across the room. She froze, her glass halfway to her lips. "Why don't you tell them, Lisa?" I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Tell them about your affair. The guy from the gym, remember him? You threw away 23 years of marriage for him. Maybe you should explain that." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. All eyes turned to Lisa. Her face went white, her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked like she'd been punched in the gut, completely unprepared for the public exposure she'd been desperately trying to avoid. She stammered, trying to say something, anything to mitigate the damage, but it was too late. The truth was out, and everyone in that room knew it. The friends she'd once charmed, the people she'd spent years impressing, were now staring at her like she was something rotten. I watched her scramble for control, her voice trembling as she tried to piece together some excuse, but it was all falling apart. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no thrill in seeing her humiliated like that, no satisfaction in watching her fall apart in front of everyone. I just felt nothing. This was the end of something that had been dying for a long time, and I was simply making sure it stayed dead. Lisa fled the party not long after that. She didn't say goodbye, didn't make any excuses. She just left, her head down, her shoulders hunched, as if she could somehow disappear into the crowd. The whispers followed her out the door. For the rest of the night, people tried to act normal, but the mood had shifted. Conversations were quieter, more restrained, and I could feel the eyes on me, questions lingering in the air that no one wanted to ask directly. I stayed for a little while longer, but eventually, I made my exit. I didn't need to stay and bask in the fallout. My work there was done. The next few days were quiet. Lisa didn't come home after the party. I wasn't surprised. She had nowhere else to go, but that didn't matter. She'd burned every bridge, and now she was out there trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. I didn't care. I had moved on, and whatever happened to her was no longer my concern. Then the unexpected happened. One afternoon, a few days after the party, I got a call. It was from one of our mutual friends, someone who had been at the party that night. "Ben, I just thought you should know. Lisa's lover, that guy from the gym, he left her. Apparently it happened not long after the divorce went through. She's not doing so great." I listened in silence as my friend relayed the details. Lisa had been dumped. The guy she had thrown everything away for had moved on, leaving her with nothing. No husband, no lover, no friends, just the wreckage of the life she tried to build on lies and betrayal. I should have felt something. Satisfaction, maybe? Vindication. But again, there was nothing. I'd gotten my revenge. I'd taken everything from her, and now she was facing the consequences of her decisions. But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt empty. Lisa showed up at the house a few days later. She looked awful, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. She stood on the porch, staring at me through the screen door like she didn't know what to say. Ben, she started, her voice hoarse. I, I don't know where else to go. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, staring at her, waiting for her to explain herself. I made a mistake, she said in her voice breaking. I thought, I thought I knew what I wanted, but I was wrong. Everything's gone. He left me, Ben. I have nothing. There it was, Tim. The final collapse. She had nothing left, and now she was standing on my doorstep, begging for scraps. But I didn't have anything left to give her. I'm not your safety net, Lisa, I said, my voice cold, emotionless. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. She looked like she was about to cry again, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to be the one to pick her up this time. I wasn't going to be her fallback plan, the person she ran to when everything else fell apart. Ben, please. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I shook my head. That's not my problem anymore. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, broken and alone. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Whatever she did next was her problem, not mine. In the days that followed, I thought about that moment on the porch. I thought about the way she'd looked, the way her voice had cracked when she realized there was no going back. And I thought about myself, about the person I'd become through all of this. Stronger maybe, colder, definitely, but not happier, not satisfied. The truth was, I had won. I had taken everything from her, just like she had taken everything from me. But the victory didn't taste sweet. It was bitter, hollow, like ash in my mouth. Lisa was broken, but so was I. And maybe that was the price of revenge, something that nobody tells you about. The cost is always more than you expect. I had walked away from her, but the scars of what we'd been through still lingered. I could feel them deep inside, the memories of what we had once been and what we had become. I had moved on, but I wasn't the same man I'd been before. And as I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been, I realized that no matter how far I went, no matter how much I tried to rebuild, there would always be a part of me that was tied to the past. A part of me that would always remember Lisa, not as the woman who had betrayed me, but as the woman I had once loved. But that part of my life was over now. The final confrontation had come and gone, and there was nothing left to say. All I could do was walk away and start over, leaving the wreckage of the past behind me, one step at a time. As I left the house that day, the weight of everything lifted just a little. I wasn't free yet, not completely, but I was getting there, and that was enough for now. Months have passed since the divorce was finalized, and my life has slowly shifted into something that feels lighter. It's hard to explain. After so many years of being with Lisa, every day had become heavy, weighed down by her betrayal, the lease, the resentment that festered between us. Now, without her in the picture, I've felt that weight start to lift. It's strange, but in the quiet moments I can breathe easier. I've reconnected with a few old friends. Tim, especially, has become a regular in my life again. We meet up for drinks every couple of weeks, catching up, sharing stories. He's still going through his own post-divorce healing, but it's good to have someone around who gets it. There's an unspoken understanding between us. We've both been through the ringer, and somehow we came out on the other side. Dating again was something I never thought I'd do. After 23 years of marriage, I figured I was done with all that. But after some gentle prodding from Tim and a couple of other friends, I decided to give it a shot. I started slow, just casual dates with women I met online or through friends. At first it felt awkward, like I didn't belong in this world anymore. But over time, it got easier. The thing is, I'm not looking for anything serious. Not now. Maybe not ever. I've built something for myself, a life without Lisa, without the complications that come with relationships. I'm not sure I'm ready to give that up just yet. I've grown comfortable in my solitude, in the quiet freedom that comes with it. There's this one woman, though. Her name's Jessica. We've been out a few times, nothing serious, just dinner and drinks, but there's something about her. She's different, easy to talk to, no pressure, no expectations. She knows what I've been through, and she's not looking to push me into anything I'm not ready for. It's nice. I'm not getting ahead of myself, but I'll admit it feels good to have someone around who isn't tied to the wreckage of my past. The past, it still lingers though. Even with all the progress I've made, there are nights when I can't shake it. When I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Lisa. Not about the betrayal, not about the anger or the revenge, but about the life we had before everything fell apart. There were good years. Years when I loved her with everything I had and she seemed to love me back. I think that's what hurts the most. Not the affair, not even the lies. It's that I gave her so much of myself and in the end it wasn't enough. That's a hard pill to swallow. But I'm learning to let it go, piece by piece. I've come to realize that our marriage was over long before the affair. I just hadn't accepted it yet. I was holding on to something that had been broken for years. And when Lisa finally shattered what was left, it forced me to face a truth I wasn't ready for. But now I'm ready. I've accepted it. The marriage, the life we built together, it's gone. And I'm okay with that. I'm better off without her, bro. I see that now. A few weeks ago, I got a job offer. It came out of the blue from an old colleague who moved out west a few years ago. He's been running his own company and needed someone to come on board in a senior role. The pay's good, the opportunity is better, and it's in a new city, far away from the memories, far away from Lisa. I haven't made a decision yet, but the idea of starting fresh somewhere new is tempting. It's a chance to leave everything behind, to truly start over without the shadows of the past hanging over me. I've been thinking about it a lot, weighing the pros and cons, but I'm leaning toward taking it. It feels like the right move. There's no contact with Lisa anymore, and I prefer it that way. After she showed up at my door, broken and begging, I knew there was nothing left between us. She was a stranger by then, someone I didn't recognize. I don't know where she is now, and honestly, I don't care. Whatever happens to her is her business. I've moved on, and she's no longer a part of my life. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever truly be able to trust someone again. I mean, I'm dating, but it's casual, surface level. I'm not letting anyone in, not the way I let Lisa in. That kind of trust, it feels like a risk I'm not willing to take right now. Maybe that'll change. Maybe I'll meet someone who makes me feel like it's worth the risk again. But for now, I'm content with where I am. There are still echoes of the past, though. They creep in when I least expect them. Little reminders of what happened, of how everything fell apart. I don't dwell on it like I used to, but it's there, in the background. It's part of me now, a scar that's healed, but still visible. I think it always will be. But here's the thing, I'm not bitter. Not anymore. I've come to terms with it. The betrayal, the pain, it's all behind me. I've rebuilt my life, and while it's not the life I expected to have, it's mine. And that's something. I look at the future now with cautious optimism. I've been through the worst of it, and I survived. I'm stronger for it, more resilient. I don't know what comes next, but I'm ready for it, whatever it is. Whether I take that job and start over in a new city or stay here and continue building this new version of myself, I know I'm going to be okay. The past will always be there, lingering in the corners of my mind, but it doesn't control me anymore. I've moved beyond it, and I'm looking forward now, not back. I've learned a lot through this process about myself, about trust, about resilience. I've learned that no matter how hard things get, you can always rebuild, always start over. It took time, but I'm finally in a place where I feel free. Free from the weight of the past, free from the bitterness that used to consume me. I'm not naive enough to think that everything will be perfect from here on out, but I'm ready to face whatever comes my way. In the end, life goes on. People come and go, relationships end, and sometimes the ones you thought would last forever fall apart. But that's okay. It's all part of the process, part of learning who you are and what you want. As I look ahead, I see possibilities. New opportunities, new people, new experiences. I see a future that's mine to shape, free from the chains of the past. And that's enough. It's more than enough. For the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to what comes next. The scars are still there, but they don't define me. I'm not broken. I'm just moving forward. And that's all I need.